Okay, welcome to our Shiur. We're going to talk once again about the Haggadah Shel Pesach, our second Shiur. If you remember last week, we spoke about the Rasha and the response of the father to Rasha and said, I think, a nice chiddush. And if you didn't listen to that Shiur, I encourage you to do so. You'll enjoy it. Today we want to talk about the Dalet Banim as a whole. And really, why is it there in the Haggadah? What's the purpose of putting the Dalet Banim in the Haggadah? So there's a Malbim, and the Malbim says that I saw that the Dalet Banim reflect the experience of American Jewry. What does that mean? So he says that the Chacham, he says, is the old Zayda, the Alter Zayda. He comes from Europe to America. He's got a lange weiße Bart. His mother, the mother is wearing, the grandmother is wearing is bedecked. They're wearing what they used to wear in those days, and they're very frum, mamish kalike bechamura. And they come to America, and they never really get into the American scene. Their English, if they do speak, is what they call broken. And they're still Heimische Europäische Yidden, Versatische Yidden, and that's how they live their whole lives, even as they're living in the Lower East Side or elsewhere in the United States. Nebuch, their children are represented by the Rasha, because he's totally wants to be part of American society. He wants to become exactly like everybody else. He wants to assimilate, he wants to acculturate, he wants to become part of America. And he throws away Yiddishkeit, he throws away Kashrus, he throws away Shabbos, Nebuch, Rahman al-Islam. And that's the Rasha. The Rasha has a son also. And the Rasha's son is the Tam. He's not so, not so anti-religious like the father. He didn't grow up with it. He's not rebelling against anything. He doesn't really know too much, but he remembers his Zayda. I remember I used to work in a Pesach store when I was a kid in Milwaukee growing up by Mr. Richt, Olav Shalom. And I remember being to two mices. One is I remember going out to a lady in the car and bringing the groceries, and she spent at that time over $100 on Pesach ticket groceries, which was a hoin rad, a lot of money today. And I put it into the car, and Nebuch, I see all the treif and meat from A&P. But it wasn't in Stira. She still remembers the Zayda. She still wants to be, for Pesach. But kosher, okay. They used to have an expression in those days. People used to eat kosher at home, and when they went out, that was also it's a madrega. Shouldn't machavek with it. Yidden went 3 days a week 3 days a year to shul. They were called 3 day a year, and they used to make fun of them. They came Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. You didn't see them all year, but at least they came Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. There was something there. There was a lichluchus. There was something left. I remember another lady telling me that her grandfather has his picture on the wall, and he was a big tzaddik because he wore 2 tefillins, one on his arm and one on his head. 2, not the regular person who wears 1. He wore 2. He was so frum. And they used to talk about their zaydas with reverence and with awe, even though they were no longer in Nebuch from. But the Zayda was the Zayda. The Baba was the Baba. And there was still, and that's the Tam. Nebuch, the Tam, doesn't have much to give over to the children. And the next door says the Malbim is the She'ena Delishal. Is the one who just doesn't know anything. He doesn't know how to ask. He doesn't even know. The Zayda is given a Rasha. The Tata is given a Tam. What does he have? He's the She'ena Delishal. So what's the purpose of it? So why is this here? Think about it, it's very depressing. But it doesn't have to be. It does not have to be, as we see, Baruch Hashem in our door, that it's almost just the opposite. It's almost just the opposite. You see that the children are frummer. The children are doing more chumrah. The children are doing more involved in Yiddishkeit. And their children even more. So it's like, what happened? Where did it go? From the Chacham Rosh Tamjay Lishol, which the Haggadah says that's the passage, and it's how to change, where to go. So I'd like to say that there is hope, and it doesn't have to be like that. V'arai, we see it's not like that all the time. In the Rav Shach Haggadah, he talks about V'areyu Osanu HaMitzrim. And the Egyptians did bad to us, right? All the psukim that we read when we read the psukim, Bi'anunu, Bi'ino Leina Vayda Kasha. So he says that many of the translators translate Vayareu Osanu HaMitzrayim is Vayareu Osanu HaMitzrayim is that the Mitzrayim made us bad. So one shot is they made us look bad. They talk bad about us, they bashmutzed us, saying Haven Nischak Malay, Pen Yirba. That's never their Sturmer approach, right? Streicher, Goebbels, that's that approach, make the Yidden look bad. The other shot is Vayareu Osanu, he made us bad. Why? Because the Hashpah of Mitzrayim was so incredibly great that it was very hard to fight. Shach says there was a Becker who once had a shaili. There was another Becker who was going in the wrong direction. And he wanted me to be on him. And he asked Shach, should I try and be friendly with him? Should I engage him in conversation? Should I have to do with him? Not. And Shach said, let me ask you a question. When you put a spoon into a pot of treif of meat, does the spoon become treif or does the meat become kosher? He says very often the hashpah goes in the wrong direction, and there's as much a chance he'll be mashpi on you as you'll be mashpi on him. And he discouraged him from doing that. And he talked about the hashpah that comes and how powerful it is, the hashpah from outside. He said there was an asken that came to Shach from America, and he was working on general societal morality, not specifically. There were laws coming up that, as we know, I don't have to tell you, that laws leading the way of immorality, and the Yid, and this Yid was fighting it, and he was from organization. The other people in the organization said, it's not our issue. That's the issue in the Ummah Soilim. Let them, they want to be ice for, if they want to do things which are immoral, let them, and they criticized him. He said, you're being paid, do better things with your time. Don't be busy with that. So he asked Rav Shach. So Rav Shach said, no. He says, you don't understand something. You make a big mistake. Everything Hatzatan Mit'ins. Everything has to do with us. Because they're going to go and they're going to do a certain morality, and you're going to see it, and it's going to make hashpah on you. And it's going to change subtly the Yidden of America. And he says, and make no mistake, in Israel, they look to America and they see what's going on over there and how they should model their behavior. They look to Europe and they say, how should we model our behavior? And therefore, Zakr Shach, you have to get involved in this, because the general morality is the morality that affects the Yiddish people as well. You can't avoid it. You can't be away from it. And that's how we have to look at it. It says we have to look at it that hashpah goes in one direction. Unfortunately, often goes in one direction. Especially when there's a roiv and a miyut. We go basa roiv, we go according to the majority. And here you have the roiv overwhelmingly. There's 350 million people in the United States. And there's less than 1 million probably Haredi Jews in the United States. So it's an uphill battle. And even more so. He said, Zakr Shach, the story of Amalek. That Amalek, the Yidden had just defeated the mighty Mitzrayim. And along comes Amalek, and Amalek fights with them. Amalek knows they're going to lose. If they defeated Mitzrayim, they're going to defeat Amalek. So what was Amalek thinking? And the answer is Amalek's hatred was so hard, like it says in the pasuk. We say in Hal, we're going to say soon, like bees. You'll be stung like bees, because just like a bee, after it stings, loses its life. So Amalek doesn't even mind losing its life in order to hurt the Jews. And the mashal of the ambatya, of the bath, there's a hot bath, nobody wants to get into it, and one Meshiganer goes in and cools it off. He gets burned and dies, okay, but the rest of them will go in. So people were not afraid of the Yidden. So when there's an immorality going on in the world, that immorality is going to affect the Yidden in America, it's going to affect the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. There's no way out, but there is a way out. And what's the answer? So here I'd like to say that this is what the Baal Haggadah, this is why the Dalet Bonim are there. The Dalet Bonim are there to show the importance of Messiah, to show that the way that a person can avoid that downward spiral of generations of the Dalet Bonim is through the Messiah of Vigarat Levincha. That's why it's so important to have the Messiah that we go. So many times, people will not do something because the tat is nishkatin, the mom is nishkatin, or my mother or father will look down on this behavior, even if they're not alive. Doesn't matter. Remember, when when Yosef was going to do the Aveira with Esha's Potiphar, he saw Yaakov, right? Yaakov's still alive, but he saw Yaakov in his mind's eye, and he said, "Can't do it." And that's really what protects us, the Messiah that we have from our parents. That makes all the difference, and that's what the Haggadah is telling us. And that's why we have the Daled Banim. The Daled Banim says there's a downward spiral, but it doesn't have to be. You can do something about it. As we said last week, tell them, look at me. Look how Kadosh Baruch Hu has done for me, because of me. And Hashem will do it for you too. And that's what the Messiah is. The Messiah is something that's so protective and will help people so much. And that's why we put it in Haggadah, to show the answer to the continuity of Klal Yisrael. Remember, we've said this many times, but in a seminar from Arachim, I think, they said, since Matan Torah was 125 generations, I think that's the number they use, and they said 124 generations made a decision, I'm sticking with the Rebbeinu Shalom, I'm sticking with the Jewish people. Do you want to be the generation that breaks 124 ancestors? Or 248 actually, because husband and wife. So do you want to be the one to do that? No. So therefore, the Messiah will protect us. So that's number one. And I think the second thing that the Baal Haggadah is telling us is, where do we do the Haggadah? Where do we do the Pesach Seder? It's all about the Mishpacha. It's all about people getting together. It's all about being a tzibur, not a yachid. Because as we go through Golus, as a yachid we will not survive. As yachidim we can't do it. We said often from Victor Miller that one person can't go and do kiruv. You got to have two. You got to have two. If Araya, Avram and Sarah, it says Avram was Megayer the Anoshim, Sarah was Megayer says Anoshim. Together they were mechazik each other. And I was thinking maybe this is why they didn't have children right away. Because this way they were able to dedicate themselves to all the things that they were doing. And then when the time came, they had children. But maybe, I don't know. I'm just saying. But the bottom line is that because people are together, they protect each other. They create the tzibur that offsets the other tzibur. When I was a child growing up, there were people who moved out of the neighborhood, out of the frum neighborhood, and they moved to other places. And they would say, the rabbi would tell them, don't move, you'll see, you're going to fall away from Yiddishkeit, your children are going to fall away from Yiddishkeit. No, Rabbi, I'll drive back, it's a short drive, by car it's only 5 minutes, Shabbos it's only a half-hour walk, and I'll make it, I'll be there Friday night, I'll drive till Erev Shabbos, and then, but, okay, it lasted for a while. They would drive Erev Shabbos, drive Motzei Shabbos, and then 1 week, perhaps they didn't feel so good, and the half-hour walk was a little too far, it got a little too cold, after all it was the Midwest, and before you knew it, they were gone, and their children were gone, Rahman al-San. So staying with the tzibur, the Al-Tifresh Minat Tzibur, that's the second inyan that a person will keep. And that's why we have the Pesach Seder together, with all the people together, because we're all mechazik each other. So we have the Messiah, Megarat Levincha of Pesach, and we have the togetherness of Pesach. And those are the things that will keep us on the straight and narrow, and help bring every door, midor ledor, ad bias kol tzedek b'mheira b'yameinu. So have a good Shabbos. And the Mitzvah Hashem, we'll try and see if we can get in a third and final shiur before the Yom HaKadosh of Leil Hiskadish HaChag, and we get to the Seder night, the beautiful Seder nights, Haba Aleinu L'Taiva, Mitzvah Hashem, Gesundheit for all of Klal Yisrael. A good Shabbos.